If you're searching for top-notch master plan communities on the west side of Katy, chances are you've seen a ton of beautiful options pop up in Grange. But choosing a place to live is more complex than just choosing the home itself. So in today's video, we're going to cover important things that you need to know about the development, along with a couple of pros and cons that you can't Google. Hi, my name is Carolyn Bauerschlag, a local real estate agent right here in the West Houston area, and I've helped hundreds of people just like you relocate from all over our country right to our great city. And if you're thinking about making a move to the area, I would love to add you to our client family. Now, here are a couple of important things to know about Grange. Grange opened right next door to the hugely popular Cane Island development that was coming to its own completion in the middle of 2025. So there was a ton of buzz surrounding the opening of Grange because we as real estate agents and people that wanted to live in Cane Island were looking for their next new construction option and where they were going to live. So Grange is situated basically lateral to Cane Island right along Franz Road. And I would say it opened to a lot of fanfare, but unfortunately Grange opened in 2025 as the market was starting to turn over. Now, buyer enthusiasm that we saw in the marketplace, at least throughout most of 2025, was tepid at best. And usually when new construction communities open, they open at elevated price points, right? Like they're selling something brand new. They want people to be excited about it, and new communities almost never open less expensive than the one that was just next door. Now, some advantages that Grange had when it opened is that because the loyalty and the following of people of Cane Island were so enthusiastic, many of the sales reps that came over from Cane Island also went to Grange, and they brought along with them clients that they knew that wanted to purchase. So right away, they had people that were either stepping up into something bigger or downsizing into something smaller. So Grange did have a reasonable amount of sales, but as it opened, I would say it had a little bit more trouble finding its feet than anyone really expected. Now, one of the primary reasons why I think Grange kind of got off to a false start is the costs associated with living there. And chief among them, of course, is the price of the home. So to get your foot in the door in Grange as it stands right now, you're going to pay somewhere around $400,000. And that $400,000 gets you about 1,750 square feet, which is really not that much. I did a price history search just to make sure that there wasn't some crazy deals that were being done. And within the last year, or at least 10 months since Grange has been going, it really is that buy-in price is right at $400,000. Now, the median price point is right around $586,000, which is elevated. And those prices do go north up towards $900,000. But that is a lot of money to shell out. The other thing to kind of put in your back pocket is that Grange is developed by Johnson Development. And Johnson Development is well known for other communities across the greater Houston area, Sienna Plantation or Cross Creek Ranch. If you're thinking of Jordan Ranch over in Brookshire, like all of those might come to mind. And what Johnson Development does in almost all of their communities is charge something called a capitalization fee or a foundation fee. And that fee is paid one time at closing, but also on every resale transaction thereafter. And the foundation fee is just another fat chunk of change that you're going to fork over whenever you buy the home. Right now, that foundation fee for Grange is sitting at 0.5% of whatever the purchase price is. Another cost associated with living in Grange is going to be the tax rate. Now, the tax rate is sitting right at around 3.33% without exemption. When you have a homestead exemption, when you occupy this property as your residence, that effective tax rate drops. You get some tax savings. But 3.33 is higher, I would say, than what you can get in the greater Katy area. Most of the things south of I-10, older neighborhoods, you're going to see tax rates racking around 2.6, 2.7. So 3.3 is nothing to sneeze at. Now, I will say Grange opened up with a better tax rate than Cane Island did 10 years prior. Cane Island moved in and there was no infrastructure around it, right? It was turning fields into neighborhoods. Cane Island opened somewhere around 3.65-ish. So Grange is better off than that, but it still is a substantial amount of money to have to consider whenever you're going to buy a home. Now, the HOA dues, if you close on a home in Grange today, are about $1,300, which is pretty similar for the developments in and around the North Katy area. And it's a little less expensive than what we see for neighborhoods that are south of I-10. And I think this being slightly less expensive has more to do with them being without amenities at this point. So if you put the shoe on the other foot, I think as those amenities come through and they get built out, I would expect to see those HOA dues creep up probably more into the $1,500, $1,600 space. Now, Grange opened without the amenities, which I think is kind of a difficulty for people that have a hard time imagining or seeing what it's going to be like to live in that area. But the good news is that in the middle of 2026, the groundbreaking is supposed to happen for kind of their main amenities green. And that completion for that amenity is supposed to be sometime in 2027. I would say probably the latter half of 2027. The main feature of Grange is supposed to be a place called Rice Stead. This is going to be kind of some commercial mixed-use development, and they're going to build it with facades that are made to look like Old Town Texas. And then it's going to be massive green space, like event lawn style behind that commercial development. And then they're going to have like the pickleball courts and the sports courts and the pool and the lake lots and all of the other things that you would expect in a master plan community built behind it. So that'll be a really key feature that I think we're all going to be excited to see. But I would expect for your HOA dues to creep up as those come to completion. Now, that Ricestead development is not going to be the only amenity that Grange has. One cool thing that they did do is they hired a lifestyle director. And this is kind of a key feature that Johnson Development, the developer, does whenever they open a neighborhood. So they've got a resident who's on site whose chief job is to put on events and really draw the community close together. And when you talk to the people that are the developers of this community, they said that the chief thing that they're trying to keep is the small town Katy feel that Katy was very well known for before it became a 100,000 student population that it is approaching today. So I think this lifestyle director is very much in the vein of making sure that neighbors know each other, which I think is a really important factor to any neighborhood's long-term success. Katy Island right down the road did the same thing. And I would say that those events are ongoing today. And that's why people not only come, but they choose to stay. Another important thing to know about Grange that you might not necessarily be able to Google is that it's being built out of the floodplain. Now, Grange is in Waller County, and Waller County, for better or for worse, doesn't have its own floodplain mapping tool. Harris County has one, Fort Bend County has one. Waller County just says, hey, go look at FEMA. And so FEMA's maps are sometimes reliable and sometimes not. But out of curiosity, I went and I looked at FEMA's floodplain maps for Grange. And you can see when you click on the links through there that updates to this floodplain map are coming through. So right now what it's showing is that where the homes are being put down on the ground, they are not in the floodplain. And in fact, they're in what we would consider a low risk area or zone X. And this makes sense to me because what I know about building codes, City of Katy, Waller County, is that they're beholden to making sure that no new construction homes are ever built into a floodway or a floodplain. So you cannot, you are not allowed by any city or municipality or local organization to build new construction where you're in a waterway. So what you need to know about new construction developments that you can't necessarily find online is that these builders have to grade up at least a couple of feet above what we call the base flood elevation. And if they build up, they're not allowed to just flood everyone else around them, right? So they have to dig down in direct proportion. And so what you see in these neighborhoods, kind of a key feature, is that there's retention ponds all over them. And retention ponds with a marketing spin are, of course, called lakes. And those lakes are, of course, then subject to lakefront property, which these builders are very smart about. And they turn around and they sell you lakefront property at a premium, right? So when you're looking at a community and you see all of these retention ponds that have pretty fountains in the middle of them, think of them as flood control. And a necessary step towards making sure that these neighborhoods are going to be in good shape from a flood risk perspective long term. Now, another major draw of Grange that I think is really important is, of course, the staying power of the school district. As it stands right now, the community is mapped out to be totally inclusive of just the Katy ISD boundaries. Now, that could change over time in that if Grange decides to expand past Katy ISD, maybe another school district gets picked up. But as it stands right now, this entire community is supposed to be a Katy ISD exclusive community. At this moment, the elementary school that Grange is zoned to is over in Katy Island. So just down Franz Road, you would go to Robertson Elementary School. But a good thing to know about Grange is that they have already sold land within the community itself to Katy ISD. So sometime in the future, it's not yet announced when, there's going to be an elementary school right in the middle of Grange, and directly across the street, there's going to be a junior high in the middle of Grange. So if that walkable sort of tight-knit community feel is going to be important to you, I would say within the next few years, you will see some beautiful Katy ISD campuses make their appearance. Another big popular thing about Grange is that it's Zone 2 right now, Katy Junior High, which will change, and Katy High School. People who are Katyites or people who know about the Katy Tigers will cut off their right leg in order to be zoned to a school that's going to go to Katy High School. And I think that is probably something that's going to be important to residents that move into the area. When you think about rezoning risks, what's going to happen in the future, you want to look at the proximity of the school to the neighborhood itself. Grange is going to be pretty close in towards Katy ISD or towards Katy High School. It might get picked up to go to a high school that's further north, but it also might not. So I promised you some pros and cons. So here's the first pro. In my opinion, I think this is going to be one of probably the last great master plan communities that's being developed in Katy, close to the heart of the city of Katy. There's really not a lot of land left in and around the city of Katy, which to me is kind of like Franz Road South all the way to I-10, right? So I don't personally expect to see another giant master plan community come up in this area after this. So with the amount of homes that they're planning to put on the ground, which is somewhere around 2,400 homes, that's probably going to take them 10 years to put together. So I would say if you're looking for a great master plan community, you probably got about another 10 years to figure that out, move into Grange and really enjoy it. They're protective, at least right now, of the idea that this is going to have a small town feel. So I think another pro of moving into this area is that what I've seen Johnson Development do in the past is going to be really beautifully done here, where when you move, you won't necessarily feel like you have to leave because of the way that they're going to put mixed use businesses, restaurants, facilities in place for you to really enjoy and get to know your neighbors. Now, a second major pro is, of course, tying into those neighbors, right? Neighbors are your community, right? And what I think really launches a neighborhood into a success place or not is going to be the guardrails that developments put up on who they sell to whenever they're building these new construction homes. And what I mean by that is we really want to see developers sell to people who are going to live and occupy the home as their primary residence. Right now, there are developments, unfortunately, in and around the Katy area, up and down the west side, that opened and said, hey, a sale is a sale. And they're selling to people with very deep pockets, investors with a lot of money that think our real estate is frankly inexpensive, which I find marginally offensive. So we've seen some deep pocket investors try to come into other communities and say, hey, that house is cheap. I'll just buy it and then rent it out to somebody. Now, there's nothing wrong with rental homes, right? But when you as a developer are selling anywhere from a quarter to a third to half of your homes to people who are going to turn around and lease them, what you do is you damage the ability for people to ever really get to know their neighbors. What you're setting up then is sort of a transient environment. So what we've seen in Grange so far is that Johnson Development has said you need to sign an occupancy affidavit that says if you are buying this home, you are going to stay and occupy this home as your primary resident. And I do think that that is going to be a major pro as this neighborhood builds out over the next decade. Now let's flip over into cons. The way that these developers are going to make sure that investors don't just come in and buy is also by not necessarily having attractive prices to investors. Now, that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but I think the costs associated with moving into Grange right this second are a con for at least the launch of the neighborhood. I think that once the amenities go in, I think once the Katy ISD schools show up, I think it's going to be irrelevant. I think the prices are going to feel like they are substantiated. But for right now, what you've got is that they're building out the eastward corner of the neighborhood, and they don't have really any amenities built out yet. And so I think it's hard for people to see, at least without their imagination, why the costs are as elevated as they are. So like I mentioned earlier, you've got a 0.5% paid to a foundation fee. You've got a 3.3-ish% tax rate. And then you've got builders whose prices are elevated. So to get your foot in the door, it is going to be pricey. Now, costs and affordability tie right into my second con. And my second con of Grange is that not all builders are responding to market condition. Now, when Grange opened in 2025, I had just gotten done selling new construction in Cane Island. I had several clients that completed their purchases in late 2024. And we were successful in getting them great 4-bed, 3-bath, 3,000 square foot homes on great lots for in or around $500,000. And so when I heard about Grange opening, I was like, give me those price sheets. Let me see them. And when I got the price sheets from the builders, I about fell out of my chair. The original opening prices that the builders were trying to get was like $550,000 for a 2,300 square foot home. And that to me was insane. I thought to myself, like, Cane Island was so reliable because I could help someone sell their house and then buy their next one, and they could have a nice step-up experience and pay a little bit more than resale, but get a great product, you know, and still stay under $500,000 in a home that they can stay in for the long haul. But in my mind, when I hear 22 or 2,300 square feet, that to me is typically indicative of someone who's either downsizing or someone who's buying kind of their entry-level home. An entry-level in my mind is not $550,000, right? And so my first reaction when I saw the price sheet was, who am I gonna market this to? And as it turns out, it took about 4 months for some builders to start responding. Now, a lot of those $550,000, 2,200 square foot homes did massive price adjustments. We saw $120,000, $130,000 come right off the top like that, and it needed to, right? So ultimately, these homes landed at that cost of around $410,000, $420,000, which is that $400,000-ish buy-in price that we're still seeing today. But what we are seeing is that a lot of builders are very resistant to doing anything. And these are decisions that are being made by regional and divisional presidents of each one of these builders, right? And I think it's going to damage some of these folks that choose not to negotiate, right? So when you go into a new construction community, the model home parks have like 8 houses that are all right next to each other. And what buyers do, and your agent, is we go into each one of them and say, hey, give me your price sheet. Give me your standard features. What inventory do you have on the ground, and what incentives are you offering? So even just 2 weeks ago, it's February of 2026. Even just at the end of January, I was standing in these Grange model homes asking these builders for price sheets and incentives, and you really had maybe less than half of the builders responding to market condition. And so it was quite shocking to me, actually. I'll just name names for a moment. Perry Homes used to build homes, put inventory on the ground, and then famously knock their prices back. Or if you were building from dirt, they would throw $25,000 or $30,000 of design incentives for you to go take to the design center. And I was standing in Perry, and I was like, hey, what are your incentives? And they said nothing. They said, we might be able to work with you on something here or there. And I kind of pressed them, and I said, well, what is something here or there? And they said, well, we might be able to get you something towards closing costs. And it was kind of just like crickets, because every builder up and down this street is offering incentives towards closing costs, but they're also offering incentives for you to be able to do something at the design center. You know, literally next door, you've got Highland Homes saying, hey, we're responding to market condition, and we understand that our base prices are high anyways. And they also know that people want to go to the design center. What Highland Homes is offering right now is up to $150,000 off, or I'm sorry, 50% off of whatever incentives you put into your home at the design center, up to $150,000 put in. So like a $50,000 or a 50% discount is hugely significant, especially when your next door neighbor is saying, I ain't doing nothing. So I think that the launch of Grange might take some time if not all of these developers or builders decide to kind of get in the boat and row together, right? So the developer will release new lots. They'll say, hey, we're in phase 2. We're opening up our next section of the neighborhood. But they'll do it when the builders have sold out of their existing lots, right? And so if not everybody kind of gets in the boat and rows together, I think the launch of Grange might take a little bit more time. If you're thinking about making a move to the West Houston area, I would love to be your realtor. Make sure to check the description below to see my phone number and email and the best way to connect. And if you found value in what you saw here today, make sure to click the link below and subscribe, because we put content like this out every single week. See you soon.